Got many positive
Get the
comments
mics on? Okay.
from residents and people driving by that they're just so happy. So I know it was like a big crunch, but we did it. I think, December 31st was when the first, because I had made a promise. I said, I promise, Joe, it's going to be gone by the end of the year. December 31st, the bucket's going in the ground.
It wasn't quite finished by then, but
Right.
it is done.
So thank you for that. So do you want to bring us up to date on what we're doing?
Yeah, if I could maybe just talk a little bit about, I'm Rip Patton with Crederi Associates. This is Rick Vandenberg. So we're, as you all know, working with with you folks to implement the EPA-funded brownfields cleanup. And from this meeting, there's a couple things we want. We just need a little bit more, some direction from you folks. We have 3 draft plans that we've drafted over the winter, and one is a community relations plan, and that talks about how we're getting the community involved in the program. There's some key dates that we'd like to finalize that as we move forward. The second thing is the analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, and that just talks about how we're going to approach the rest of the cleanup moving forward. The third one is a site-specific quality assurance project plan, and it's sort of more an EPA DES document that they review, and it says, for confirmatory sampling, this is what we do, and so it's not, we don't really need input from you, it's more of a technical document. And then, once we have that, discuss that, really the approach to how we want to move forward, there's some options that we have, is, the source area removal is sort of a defined, but the actual soil covering has sort of changed from what we originally had, envisioned about incorporating it in with the bridge, and if that's now on a different, property, we sort of have an open slate now on what you want to do, what we want to do, how much money we have left, what we have some ideas for you,
right,
but what to do with the remaining amount of the cleanup money. So that's really what we're hoping to get some guidance from you folks today. We did remove the building was actually completed in January. It went well. It did, from our perspective, it took a lot longer, like using, we made a conscious effort to use local contractors, but when sometimes dealing with we had a lot of hand-holding through them, and even though they did everything properly, just from our involvement was a lot more on and that kind of, probably not surprising in hindsight, but I mean there was no change orders. There were that all went smoothly. Everything is disposed of properly. The asbestos was handled properly, so that was good. The only thing that did pop up is as they were removing the concrete slabs, we did find an old hydraulic cylinder there wasn't lifts there, but it must have been from another generation ago of the building, or because it wasn't on the surface. It was only after you took
floor poured on top of it. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
So that's still there. We didn't want them. We basically, the next phase is to get more, heavier environmental contractor who's going to do soil removal. That's more up there. We figured it was better to just hold off on removing that, so that does have to be removed. And we did incorporate that into the analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives. So that is in all the budgeting that we've done and moving forward. So it's not really, we're not adding it into all the information that you have. We were able to incorporate it before we sent out the draft documents. So that is something new that came up. It's not, we did get costs to address it. When you look at, there's sampling, you have to get it removed. It's about $3,000 is what we're estimating. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge dollar amount. So that's, any questions on, I guess I should, Joyce, did we send you pictures that we had, or I guess you have plenty of pictures?
We have Chuck, Mitchell, and Kathy have taken tons of pictures.
Better pictures than we do.
Okay, good.
Probably about 4,000 or 5,000, 400 or 500 anyway.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, we got pictures of everything.
Okay, that's good.
Do you think that you could put those on a CD or a couple?
We have one already. I can give it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just for the final report.
I also would like some before and after pictures.
Yeah.
Obviously, anything from that.
And for those who may not have seen the wonderful
Gingerbread.
Well, actually, it was made out of graham crackers, but at Christmas time, there was like a gingerbread house, and we had before, during, and with the roof collapse, really in different stages, and we've got pictures of that. We
Put that on the cover of our closure report.
It's just fun for the community.
Yeah.
It was.
We're commenting.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
We used a hot glue gun, by the way, with graham crackers. And then frosting to do the colors, and we had the signs up.
Caution tape.
Yeah, and the sawhorses. And
Yeah, that's great. Okay,
So I'll make sure that, do you need a CD or?
I don't need
Okay.
one, no, thank you.
Okay.
actually, just one thing, we were planning on, when everything is done, just to pull everything together, maybe after we haven't done a report, and I don't know if that's something, we were going to wait till later. It might make more sense maybe after the source area gets removed, because then there's going to be a longer lull, to then maybe do like an interim sort of status report that sort of gives you all your information.
Yeah, I'm going to need a final, sort of a cleanup report, basically. You know, you have your APGA, and then there'll be comments on that, and then doing the remediation, but we'll need a wrap-up report, basically, so. And, you know, we can submit it to us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously after the remedial work is completed, we would need this thing, you know, just to document what was done.
Yep. Okay. So just moving down our list, the draft community relations plan, and what the intent, and maybe Kathy can probably explain it better than I can, is, but the intent is, under using public funds, they wanted to get the public's input, like giving them the opportunity to comment and get involved in a project. I think sometimes there must have been cases where something happens and then, you know, someone from the town shows up afterwards and says, hey, well, what about this and this? Did you think of this? And so they have a process that they get involved in each of the, you know, in how you're going to approach the remediation. And it's also, actually, it's a function of, I don't know if anyone's familiar with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and it does, basically says that the environment, I think the public have to be involved in federal decisions. So I think this funding is a federal.
Right, it triggers more intensive community involvement requirements, and that's kind of what you're saying. And so basically, we ask each recipient of a cleanup grant or any cleanup actions that are going on under revolving loan funds, they have to put together a community relations plan. It's usually a 5 to 7 page document. It just sort of highlights who's going to be in charge of communicating with the public, where your repository of documents are going to be stored. If people want to come in and look at, say, the schematics of the Ernies site or any of the documents that have been submitted, either EPA or New Hampshire DES, when you're going to have a public hearing, if you will, or some sort of opportunity. It could be at a select board meeting where you have it on the agenda and people get a chance to comment on it. I know you've had a lot of intensive discussions with a lot of folks. This is
Right.
not, you know, our requirements are probably have been met and exceeded by the processes we have gone through already, clearly. But, I mean, we do just need to have that small documented,
Documented,
and
right.
it just lays out, you know, who's going to be your main spokesperson, where your material's going to be stored, when you're going to have your public comment, public meeting, and, you know, just laying out the dates and the timeline for final input before the remediation occurs, basically.
But how many do we need? Just one or two, three?
It's officially one public meeting to go over the draft analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, but we do have, like, this is is being recorded,
It's a public, right.
it counts as a public meeting too, and it's open to the public, so there is a series, so which, the only other, so it's just having, you know, starting a 30-day comment period on the draft analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, having one public meeting, you know, in there, and then having a means of how you notifying the public. And what we have is you put a public notice in the newspaper, in the local newspaper, you put it up on your website, and that, you know, typically, you know, meets that public notification requirement. And it notifies it of the 30-day comment period plus the public meeting.
In part of that, I think I would really prefer to have, you know, paper as part of the paper and go along with that, but have a public meeting, as you will, at night, because most of our constituents and residents have work, so they can't get out during the day like we are not right here now. They can't get away. And if they have comments that they would really like to do, they would really like to prefer to come at night. So if we have another public meeting, I'd prefer it to be at night. All of the other things can go during the day and we can publicize it, but have it as part, we can even have it as part of the Selectmen's meeting and have it, at 6:30 at night, and just have it at part of that. Or Concom, whatever. However we work it, it doesn't matter to me, but
Doesn't matter with me either.
I would, not that there are people that would, breaking down the doors to get here because they're very pleased at what's going on, but if there are people out there that have questions, I'd really love them to have the opportunity available for them to come in here and talk about them, rather than seeing them down the street and saying, hey, how about this? Right.
Are your meetings typically during the day or select?
No, at 4:30 in the evening.
Yeah, so you may want to schedule a later meeting.
Right.
Accommodate people's work schedule and have it focus on this particular
Right.
project.
And part of our meetings is a public comment. We always try to push the public comment portion of the meeting to 6:30, so that people are home from work, and if they have an issue, they can stop in and talk about that issue at that time, although we entertain anyone that comes in anyway. But Concom's meetings is usually, the Conservation Commission is usually at night anyway, so they go in and
Let me just double
if
check.
people have questions, they're going to contact us, but that really is not going to satisfy your requirement and documentation. I mean,
Public forum.
exactly.
One thing, if I can just suggest, though, is when we've had specific ABCA public meetings, no one shows up. And it's nice to add it on with have it part of something that is,
Right.
because you're automatically getting people there.
Right.
And I don't know about the Conservation Commission, or even a Winnipesaukee River Trail Association meeting, that if they have people who are, if there is a normal routine night meeting, that we can have it at
Right.
that, it's something that gets other people there to
Right.
talk.
Right.
I actually was at a meeting last Wednesday on three sites in a community, and no one showed up, so.
It would probably be more appropriate to a Winnipesaukee River Trail or Conservation meeting than it would be a Selectmen's meeting, unless there's a real heated issue coming up, and probably nobody would show up, but...
Well, our next meeting is, the Conservation Commission's on Monday, the 15th of April.
Okay.
Since we only generally meet monthly, the one after that would be...
So that would be further out than what you need,
It
right?
would be May 20th.
Would we get our comments back from DES?
By the 15th?
Well, no, don't we have to have your comments before we even go out?
Yeah.
One of our
So,
meetings,
I
like
can
the
probably-
conservation and,
Okay, so it'll be
you know,
first week of
just have a
April.
public hearing at night.
And then on the way, the week after that, so I want to get the comments done. So we can get the comments to you guys, and then, right, and then we start the clock once, the comments.
So what would be a time frame that you would want a public hearing?
No, I mean, if, it all depends on when we start the 30-day comment period. Like, if you're saying that you will get it by the 5th, which is next Friday.
Yes.
And that way we can start the comment period on the 8th, having the public meeting on the 15th, is perfect, so.
Yeah, that would work, because it's sort of, you want the meeting sometime within the 30-day period, so some people can come and talk to you about it, other people will hear about it, and they may want to make comments on it, so it's having a meeting in the middle of the period.
Do we have time for papers, advertisements for the
Oh, yeah.
15th? Are you okay with having it at the
Sure.
Concom?
Sure, why not?
I think that would be a better venue than Selectmen's meeting, I think.
And then if people from the Trails Association can come?
Yeah?
It also
You guys
makes
should
good
be-
sense because they were involved with the initial purchase of the property, so it's a natural
Right.
fit, it seems like.
We'll post a meeting and have it up here, so we can
Right.
accommodate
Yeah. And
everyone.
then you can have the speakers and
Sure.
have it on tape and whatever.
And if we could tape it, that way we can put that on the website as well.
Right.
Yep.
We could do that.
Joyce, just, I do have a conflict that evening.
On the 15th?
But Rick can handle, I mean, he does it all the
Yeah.
time, so it's not a...
Okay. So the 15th, everybody? Okay. So, Joyce, you'll work with Chuck and do the newspapers and the announcements?
Joyce, we can send you the language that we have for the public notice.
Okay.
7 o'clock for that meeting.
So this could be just,
What we will do is, we will open the meeting at 7 o'clock and then go directly to the hearing. And so that's when it'll begin, right then. We won't
It's a
have any
public
other
meeting, not a
business.
hearing, too.
Excuse me, we will,
It's not a hearing.
right, we will have a
So a
public meeting.
public meeting,
yeah.
and if there's any comments, if there's no comments, they can just continue with the meeting and then, right, okay.
Right, and actually, just to give I mean, just to show, I mean, maybe incorporate some of the picture, I mean, talk a little bit about what's happening, too, for, I guess you guys are all up to speed on it, but,
I don't think the full commission, I haven't,
okay.
so if anyone who wants to do a brief summary or just anything that wants,
What the plan
that'll be
is.
fine.
I can do that. I can give a summary as to what we've done in the project.
Yep. And I'm sure your summary is going to be a lot different than mine, which is, wow, the building's gone.
And with the snow cover, you
getting
can't
to the
see anything.
Although I think that is the general reaction in the town. Gee, it's finally gone.
Great. So then, if we start on the 8th, it's going to basically roughly end May 8th, and then we'd be able to start, the actual cleanup that next, I mean, if we're ready, we'll be able to start, we have enough time, is that we'll be able to start pretty much that next week.
great.
And then just, so if we're saying it's roughly going to start the middle of May, we did add another meeting that we would just have a general, just to update kind of where we are in the middle. And I had it as May 22nd. I don't know if I just added that, if Joyce, you gave me that date or not as one of your selectmen meetings. If it evens a little bit later, I think that's fine too.
May 22nd?
It's a Wednesday?
We
I'm
meet
not sure
on...
if I got that
Wednesday.
off of your website or if I just made the date up as
Well,
the general time.
You made it up because Thursdays are our meeting.
Okay. Sorry.
So do you want to go ahead and schedule some time on the meeting on the 23rd, or
Yeah,
is that okay?
that's fine. 23rd would be fine. We can accommodate 4:30 on a Thursday if you'd like.
Yep.
That's when we begin.
That'd be good.
Okay. So to get into the next step is really to talk a little bit more about the analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives and how we're moving forward. The project has,
No pencil.
has sort of three phases right now. One is, was removal of the building, one is addressing the soil, one is addressing the groundwater contamination that is there. And, obviously the buildings is already down. For the soil, as part of the analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, we evaluated two separate options.
Rick, on the table there, I made copies of the APCA and the
Okay.
SQUAP, and if you want to pass those out to anybody that,
Does anyone want a copy? Or?
I have
and
one.
Rick would need one.
Well, actually, I have two.
I've got an electronic copy.
You're all set?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay.
So when you look at it, you try to balance, your environmental, objectives with cost. And as part of our analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, looking at the soil, we looked at two options. One is source removal, and, removing where the higher level of contamination is, and then covering the rest of the PAH contaminated soil with just a soil cover system. We have a marker layer, some clean soil on top of it. That was one alternative, and then the other one is to evaluate, basically try to remove all the contaminated soil, but when you look at the low levels and based on our experience, we don't even know where it all is, and so the cost, and we just made some assumptions on it, it basically becomes a lot more expensive when you look at that. A lot of the PAHs is considered a background condition too, even though it's still a health risk, a health hazard to people on the surface soil. So we're still covering it is an appropriate technique for addressing the remaining lower levels of contamination in the soil. The benefit that the soil cover system does is it gives us some flexibility on what the cover is going to be. For instance, when we look at if you want a gravel parking lot, that can be, the gravel can be part of your cover system, so we can actually start to integrate your redevelopment in with the cleanup too, and that way it keeps some of the costs that you have, makes it eligible. Any of the grading that you might need, some of the loaming and seeding for the park. If there is going to be a trail that goes down to the water, a gravel trail, that can be included. So it's a way, to incorporate all the environmental objectives, but also helps move your redevelopment forward for your park. And that's so. The other benefit of the source removal is that we think over time it's going to clean up the arsenic that we found too, is by removing this area. Also by having, if you were to look at just more groundwater infiltration, we remove some of this imperviousness, we would expect that the arsenic to drop within standards. So that's sort of the third phase that's included in both alternatives, is to do some continued monitoring of the arsenic. Did I explain that right?
Pretty close.
Question, so the 3 annual groundwater samples, is that something that's covered under the EPA grant, or is that something we have to apply to DES?
Yeah, that was something, and maybe Jen, you can talk, that you talked with Rick about, since the arsenic, one of the things that we suspect, and you look at some of the groundwater data, is that there was some low levels of petroleum that we think is changing some of the geochemistry and is what's causing some of the mobilization of the arsenic. And since that is caused, kind of indirectly by the former petroleum release, that is covered through the New Hampshire Petroleum Program.
Okay.
So it's a separate application, and what we could do is we can apply on your behalf and
Okay.
get reimbursed directly from them, so it doesn't go to the town too.
Okay.
If it gets accepted, there still has to be an application, correct?
Well, an application, so just to make sure the site's eligible, and I believe the site is eligible, the tanks were removed, and the documentation that they were removed. It would be an eligible site. It would just be basically paperwork. It's not even an application. It's just making sure T's are crossed, I's are dotted, kind of thing. It won't be a problem. So, but there is a deductible that we could probably talk about, right? The $5,000 deductible. That the town, once if you guys are direct applicants, that first, request for reimbursement will trigger us to send a deductible. Well, actually, it won't trigger it until $5,000, I think, is hit. You have to pay the $5,000 before we can reimburse. If they're direct applicant, you will be billed for $5,000. If you're not direct applicant, you would build $5,000 credit to the state and then get reimbursed.
Okay.
Either way, but
That's scary.
yeah, that's just how it is. So yeah.
I'm just leery about getting reimbursed by the state because they owe us so much money already.
Well, they wouldn't reimburse you, they reimburse us, so
That's even scarier.
But they have other
You're more
sites.
apt to get it because you're a private concern.
Yeah, we're used to it.
Municipalities are very low on the totem pole.
But the process for that reimbursement has gotten much better with it. There's an electronic process that you can now use, and it's streamlined everything, and the system works. And it worked fine before. It works even better now.
It's a little quicker now.
So the question you may be forming in your heads is why go through the DES program for the to get there's a deductible for $5,000 when the cost that we're presenting are really for the 3 rounds is only about $6,000. There's a couple of things to be in the program ahead of time and to be working towards using up those deductible dollars. That's one thing, provided the project goes as we've indicated 3 rounds. If the arsenic concentrations stay up and there has to be more work, those costs might be more in the future, and so then anything over that $5,000 deductible, you're going to be covered. As it stands currently, there'd be a savings of about $1,000. So
Plus the well replacement if
plus
we
the
have
well,
to do that.
that's the other key.
Covered.
That's what I was going to get to, is once the soil removal work happens, at least one well is going to be taken out of service and have to be replaced. But with the soil covering work that has to happen, you never know when you have heavy equipment movement on a site whether other wells will have to be replaced. And if it's of one of the 3 wells that we're recommending sampling, then the replacement of those wells, the part of that per monitoring would be covered too.
If I can also add in, just to clarify too, can the cleanup grant can still cover that deductible, the $5,000? I mean, if it's an eligible brownfields cost?
No, the cleanup grant cannot, I don't think the cleanup grant can have a deductible. Deductible is sent to the town unless you know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I can look into that. I'm wondering if it could be part of the town's in-kind contribution. Because the town has a 100% cost share on this, and the cost share can be any eligible brownfield activities, staff time, supplies, what we talked about volunteer time, we kind of calculated out, work on with the trail folks and conservation. So that's the one question I'm not clear on.
just saw those microwave roofs.
I haven't seen that, but it may
Yeah.
be.
I'll ask.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think in my head, because it's not federal funds matching federal, because there's not that issue. I haven't come across it either, so I don't know.
I mean, it's worth investigating, let's put it that way. I can check and see if the only way it would be covered would be if you could add it to your in-kind contribution. That's the only potential way, because it can't. So that's the only option. The town.
And is that because you can't reimburse, it's reimbursing the DES, or, because if, I'm just,
No,
again,
it's
more
because
processing.
Because the town has to, because it's, let me know. Yeah, because I think it's because it's part of the DES program, it's not, it's a little fuzzy in my mind at this point,
Yeah,
how
well-
it goes. That's the only way I can think about it creatively, is to say, if it would be at all eligible, it would be, the town can use that to account their $10,000 cost share. I mean, then that would knock their cost share down to $5,000, so that's
Well,
easy.
it's 20,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, 20, not 20, so even more so.
So that would make it 15?
Yeah, if this is allowable, okay, let's.
If it's allowable,
Yeah,
right,
it's a big-
okay.
Big if, because I don't know, I haven't done this before on a cleanup
Okay.
grant, so I don't know if this is considered. The cost share expenses have to be eligible brownfields activities. So yes, it's a sampling event, it's an eligible activity, but because it's part of the New Hampshire program, do we consider deductibles eligible, that kind of thing. So it's a little,
Permits you don't usually, right? But
yeah.
in this case, it might be.
Yeah, it's not really a permit, it's an activity. That's why I'm wondering if we can creatively make it part of the cost share, it would save the town that much money. So, I'll go back and investigate, that's the best I can tell you at this point.
So that's really it in a nutshell, what the analysis, it's a 30 pages to say basically that. We do recommend doing the source removal and the soil covering as the recommended alternative. We do have costs in there for what we think. From what we know, implementing the soil covering system, does, fit in with your, the grants that you have. Depending on really what we want to do with the site though too, you can be, want to add new things into it, Some innovative stormwater controls. I mean, I think there's some things to try to look at, trying to incorporate too into the project.
Probably, but we didn't incorporate it as part of it.
Just if I could also add, as a part of that, the APCA development, there were 3 presumptive remedies. There were 3 things that we said we had to do presumptively, one of which is what we already talked about, replacing the wells and then doing the groundwater sampling. And then the third, those are the first 2, and then the last thing was that lift, the removal of lift. We're sort of saying, regardless of what we chose as the right alternative, that lift, in order to make this redevelopment happen, has to come out. And so that's an important part. And really, when we looked at it, when you consider the soil removal part, that little square that we have here, this little square, we went through that. That was included in the analysis, but also, at the end of the day, to be able to cover the site, and and to satisfy the DES, we really need to do that soil removal for the groundwater monitoring later to fit, because we're saying we're removing a source of arsenic and lead out of the ground, and then we're sort of left with nothing, and then you can go ahead and monitor, and that allows it all to sort of work.
Just from my understanding, so when I go back and pose this question to the grant specialist, so when the town incurs the $5,000, which they need to in order to start the reimbursement process, what's the time frame on, say, the first round of monitoring for the arsenic in the groundwater?
It'll probably, we'll have to figure that, it's whether or not you want to wait till after the soil covering or just do it after the source removal. And I would think, once the source is removed, that you can start.
You can start the monitoring, but if you've got wells that were destroyed, or if you install a new well and then during the soil covering we can't reimburse for work that, like if we pay you guys, reimburse you to install a well and then 2 months later you destroy it, we can't pay to reimburse because it's on-site activities. Since the wells were installed part of the brownfields program, I can say, well, I need these wells as part of my program. So it's probably safest to wait until you've completed all the work that might destroy anything else. Yeah, I would be more comfortable.
And then that's when you'd start sampling.
Yes.
After everything's done, then you'd start sampling.
Right. So basically, when you look at tasks of what we're recommending, is you go in, you have to do the soil source area removal, then you have to do your soil covering, so that basically you're going to have a redeveloped site, and then we're going to put our wells in and do the post remediation groundwater sampling.
Yeah, because I was just thinking we just have to have the cost incurred within the period of the grant. Because basically when the grant closes out, the money's drawn down, the $200,000, and then we ask for the accounting by the grant recipient of the cost share. So if it's an eligible cost share, as long as it occurred within that 3-year period of the grant, which it sounds like it would. I didn't know how far down the road you were going to.
Yeah.
It should be like this summer, by the time we're done with everything, and they can do a summer round.
Okay.
That was
So
sort of
December
triggered.
2013.
Yeah, sometime, I would think, based on the timing that you guys have here for when you're going to start, most likely in
Yeah, or the fall.
June, yeah, or early, late summer maybe.
Okay.
Because I think our grant ends in August of 15, July of 15.
2 more years on the grant. Yeah,
Okay.
2+ years, so you have plenty of time. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
That makes complete sense, Kathy.
Yeah. So that's-
So we're pretty much on target as far as budget and our monies?
We think so. It all depends on how much you want to add to it, and that's, if we just wanted to cover it and put a parking lot, I mean, it's easy within that budget. It's how we want to put, what do you want the redevelopment to be, I guess?
Right.
And that's what sort of is open right now, and I think that's going to,
Would it be helpful if I give you a real quick update as to where we are with bridge planning?
yeah.
Sure. We could need to set a time to really come sit with the select board.
And Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission, all of that. We're still in that phase where the engineers are giving us alternatives. So we don't have a plan to present as the final plan. And they did just start, they had to wait to get approval from the Department of Transportation, and we have notified the one butter and get permission from you folks and from Northfield to do a couple of test borings. Because part of the engineering study is, will the subsurface layers hold the footings, or is it fill, or what is it? So they're just starting those test borings this week. After they get those test borings, on two different alternative landing sites on this side of the river. The one on the other side of the river, they've got a primary site they're most interested in that open area on the downstream side of the White House. But on this side, there's one that's a little further downstream of the old dam, but the preferred one is a little bit upstream of the old mill building.
Both on this property?
No, they're actually on the other property. The
Right.
Conservation Commission
Okay.
is working to acquire for the town. And that leaves it off of this parcel.
Okay. So both of those sites are on that other piece, okay.
There is the third option, which was the one we preferred least, but Department of Transportation has not ruled it out, which was to go along the railroad right-of-way a little bit further back to the east, in front of the White House, right near the downstream abutment of the existing railroad bridge, and start from there and come right back onto this corner of the Ernies property,
Right.
where when we first started talking, we all thought it would be.
Yeah.
That's the least, that's the least desirable from the bridge point of view and also the cost point of view. Bridge point of view, for multiple reasons, it's just harder to build it. You got more access road you have to build next to the railroad, and then you have the added cost of taking that access road out. But also, if it's there, it starts out on the Northfield side of the river on a higher embankment that you would need to build a lot of fence on, so people wouldn't fall down into the river supposedly. The other piece, just from a purely aesthetic point of view, is you wouldn't see the bridge as much. And since it's going to be such a nice feature, and it is all about alternate transportation, but also about tourism, if people see it, they're going to stop. And if they stop in the park, they're going to walk to the stores in the center of town. And that's, so if it's downstream, which is a much better place to build the bridge, it also adds to that whole other aesthetic piece. So we're really hoping that that all works out to be the preferred location. They're going to have more information back to Tom Jameson at DOT in about 3 weeks. And at that point, about that time frame is when we should have a meeting. We'll ask those engineers if they can possibly come and talk with you, as well as people from Winnipesaukee River Trail, so we can see what those reports look like and those alternatives look like. At that point, they're also supposed to have for us some pictures of what a bridge might look like, a physical bridge. We want to make sure everyone's involved in that discussion, takes a quick look at it, and like what it looks like.
We definitely want to be a part of that.
Now, it's my understanding that you cannot do test borings on this other site, on this side of the river, until after we actually own it. Is that correct, or the town owns it?
They were trying to get permission from the state to, if they can, from the Department of Transportation to do it while the Department of Transportation is going. And Tom Jameson was going to make a request to see if that was possible. I don't know the answer to that. That was just last week on Thursday. He told us he was going to make that request. So we don't know.
So the test borings that they're doing in the Tilton,
On the Northfield side.
on the Northfield side, but to come over and do them on the Tilton side, it would just be on the Martin piece, not the Ernies piece.
Correct.
Okay.
You've updated Rip on the property, on the mountain property.
Excuse me, you mean the
correct?
state-owned piece?
I'm sorry, the state-owned piece.
Yes, the state-owned piece.
Yes.
Yes.
I believe I got copied on an email that Jim Bouchard from Quantum, he had sent you, you're just blinking, does this make any, sent you what the proposed, what they were going to propose to get permission from DOT to get test borings. Did you get that?
Did you give Rip an update on our acquisition of that piece of property?
No, I have not.
Okay, so he has no idea where we are in the process of acquiring that piece of property?
The town was notified that we had to meet before the Long-Range Planning and Utilization Committee. And we did that earlier in March. They are the ones that have to offer the land for sale to the town. And then it is the New Hampshire Housing Authority that actually gets last dibs on any piece of property in the state that is up for sale before the sale can take place. And is one of the nice things at the public hearing was they did not actually mention, they mentioned the 2 parcels of land, but they did not mention publicly that it happened to be sitting on the Winnipesaukee River, which was very nice. Someone in the committee moved that they approve it, and it passed with no resistance.
Can't build state-supported housing in the floodplain.
So we are...
And so the next step is that as soon as they get the letter of waiver from the New Hampshire Housing Authority, then it'll go to the governor and governor's council for approval. It was anticipated that it could be done by June.
So, at least from the Winnipesaukee River Trail Association point of view, what we're hoping is that we have that site of the bridge finished about the same time you finish to get everything up, so that we can have that input into what we put back for coverage. Because all the different scenarios, you'll have the trail going across this parcel,
Okay.
and moving along further down the railroad. And so we'd want to integrate that into the coverings, and the whatever trail from the parking lot down to the river is all one and the same.
So if the bridge is not going on this piece of parcel, then all we're expecting is a covering in trees and parking lot.
Part of the trail.
Part of the trail. The trail still crosses across this property.
And then the trail
What
will
is the
have to...
trail going to be made of? It's not,
Crushed stone,
Yeah.
right.
which is a...
I'm thinking I'm thinking in terms of budget, expense to develop this. It'd be easier to develop it without the bridge landing on that piece of property, because then you have to
Right,
do it.
right.
That's what I was thinking.
It probably isn't going to be a bridge footing,
Right.
which originally we thought we would. But you were saying before that something like the gravel parking lot and trail could be part of the covering.
Sure.
So this, and I was looking at your cross-section, and it looks an awful lot like the cross-section of the trail.
Oh, is it?
The
Okay.
crushed gravel,
Yeah.
and then some kind of a mesh, and then the stone dust. Pretty much what the cross-sections of the trail look like, too.
To Rick Silverberg, to construct that portion of the trail and how it's going to tie into the railroad right-of-way, is there going to be like a lot of construction trucks and vehicles and things that would need to be driving through there?
You have to somehow back up through there to deposit the gravel and things and stone dust, and then the machinery to compact it. That means they usually drive on the trail itself as they move it. It's not exactly on top of the sewer right away, but a lot of it is down in that part close to that corner.
The sewer right-of-way is to the left there, right? Yep. Well,
Part closest to the road wouldn't be the sewer right away. One of the things that the engineers from Quantum will come back with is, we saw rough drawings the other day, but where the trail goes near the road to go around the other sewer line culvert. Has to take out, somehow get across.
Is that on this?
The old one.
So you're talking about over here?
The blue, big blue area that comes up from the water into the, that comes out of a pipe. And somehow the trail has to either go around it or across it.
Then go from where it's going to land to the south over, then onto Ernies.
Yeah.
And then through the park at Ernies and off to wherever else.
do we have a new design? A newer design? I know that's an old one. I think we...
Well, that's part of today's meeting is to figure out, do we need to do another design? Is it just going to be incorporated with the civil engineers who's working on here and the trail? And so our original proposal and scope was we had, with the bridge coming here, we had just assumed that we would just give them the sort of the section, make sure it's incorporated in their design plans, we just do a little bit of oversight. So the covering, kind of from our original scope and assumptions, was that we were going to integrate what we needed into their work. And
Yeah, with the old idea that the bridge would come there, it would have been that way. But now the bridge would be downstream over here.
Right.
So the trail comes, and it just connects in here somewhere, and it's still the same.
So that would all be the same,
Those
so,
parts are all pretty much the same.
but wasn't there plans for a landing of some sort for a kayak or? Okay. So that would, all that part would remain the same, so the trail, the dimension of the trail.
Would just be, instead of connecting in here, it would come and connect in up here someplace. Because you only want one trail going across the area and down to connect with the rest of the trail.
What about on the edge of the road, the berm that's between the Route 3 and the parking lot? What would that consist of there?
I mean, this piece up here,
Yeah. I thought, at one time we spoke of boulders or something to that effect at the last meeting.
I remember at a very, very early stage, Bobby Cormier was just interested in limiting the access to parking to one entry.
One entry, right?
So that you want something so people aren't driving in and out of the road in a much wider opening.
And I think it was a concern of Catherine as well, wasn't it, it might have been Concom's, that we aesthetically make it conducive to that area.
Right.
And using nature's means to,
I think they did talk about putting a series of boulders or something along the edge of the road.
Because they're readily available and cheap compared to other alternatives.
and they're not,
To move. They don't need any maintenance, except to occasionally push them back in place.
and they're not, I look at it as that's been a catch-all for people to put a lot of signage and a lot of things up there, and boulders, they're not conducive to putting signs up against or on or whatever.
Well, I think also once that becomes like more of a park,
Right.
we're not going to, the town can do something to keep all that miscellaneous stuff out of there.
So is that,
Also, I can see that on the left side of that, where the parking area is going to the left in there, that there's going to have to be I assume the path is going to go up closer to the road because it can't, or you're going to have to put a little bridge across where the drain is.
with the drainage, yeah.
So I imagine that the path will go right around that and then back down.
There was something that they were dealing with from the state about how wide the road right-of-way is in some future plan. The state wants to make sure there's enough space so they keep their whole right-of-way in case they ever want to widen the road or widen the shoulder.
Rick, I mean, if you were to look at, I mean, the scheduling now for this, I mean, it's not happening anytime soon. I mean, I guess what is this, will be the schedule for doing, design of the pathway and
Late summer.
Late summer? Really?
The design is going on right now, but we don't expect we're going to have anything approved till late summer.
Till late summer. That's all part of the bridge and connecting into that, okay.
But can I just make sure I understand this? If it's going here, is the trail, like your design, going to still include going down to here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's connecting into that, right?
That's part of the DOT.
It is connecting into what RIP has as a trail now, as a path.
There is a very remote possibility that the state would want to see us do it on the other side of the river, but we doubt it, because the Railroad Bureau has to get involved, and they've indicated all through this entire project that the further we are from the railroad and the less contact we had with the railroad, the better. So they always like this plan better than the other one, Because on this side of the river, the railroad right-of-way from the center line of the tracks goes to the north by about 38 to 45 feet. Whereas on the other side, from the railroad center line to the property line of the White House, is very tight. It's only about 27 feet. And in order to get, we have to be 15 feet from the center line, and then we're supposed to build an 8-foot trail. So it's just barely enough.
So does this hold up a design if we know where the footbridge is coming in? I mean, we have two places where the footbridge is going to come in. Can you estimate where the two locations are where the footbridge is coming in? What kind of a curve you need to come in from the footbridge over to the existing pathway that you have there, Rip? I mean, it's not really going to change.
Right, but just to be clear, though, this is just a conceptual plan, you know what I mean? There's no survey, so there's a lot more that needs to be done to put this into, and I gotta think there's gonna be a lot of other meetings that
Right, a lot
the
of
town is
public,
gonna have.
a lot of public input.
Public input in too, so this, you know, we don't expect this to be, you know, go.
Like it is
design
right now?
on it. It's gonna be a lot, I think there needs to be a lot more input first from you folks, from the Conservation Committee, you know, and it's still unclear to us if we're taking the lead in that, or if, you know, Winnipesaukee Trail is as part of their normal trail. I mean, it's not, so there still needs to be a lot, at least in my mind.
I think we all know that that's the best place for a parking lot.
Right.
And that we want a trail from the parking lot down to a landing by the water. And that whatever part of that pathway we can is shared as part of the through trail. So that if people are walking, we've only got one trail across that property rather than two.
Right.
There was one really early drawing that had two, and that was disappeared a long time ago. So there was like a separate trail from the parking lot.
Right.
That it's much better when we have one trail rather than two.
So you want to give that trail closer to the river as you can? Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily. There's some benefits to keep it away a little bit. So right where it is works fine for Winnipesaukee River Trail, but it could be a little closer, a little further.
But you got to work the other trail into that, it's coming off that bridge.
We also, has the Conservation Commission, have they been talking on a preliminary design, what they would like to see there? Because I mean, I would think that they would be the foundation driving force to what they would like to see is what the park would, you know, ultimately look like. I know that there's some limitations to what Winnipesaukee Trail need because of the footbridge and the placement of it and the pathway. I get that part, but predominantly it's, you know, a conservation area.
Yeah, we had original plans for all kinds of things, from picnic tables to whatever, for on that property, as well as fishing access. And so, but I'm sure that the goals of that, and we have not had a chance since the way the time frame has worked on the purchase of this from the state, to sit down and to try to come up with a design for that property. But I do think that we need to be able to sit down and have some dialogue with the Winnipesaukee Trail folks about where the trail, how the trail is going to meet wherever the final location is for the footbridge, and how that whole thing will work. And then how we, because I think that the Conservation Commission and the town needs to have some equal input into that, rather than just the Trail Association say, well, here's where we want to put the trail. So once we can work the trail part of it out, then we can start working, I think, on some of the other parts of the detail.
The only parts that we know for sure is that somehow it's got to cross off of this property and onto the railroad right away down here. That's a given. And somehow we have to get from over here to there.
Right.
Yep.
But anything else is open for whatever you want to do.
But also one of the,
We all like the idea of having some kind of access to the river.
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
And I think one of the criteria is a kiosk in some way on the state-owned, soon-to-be town-owned
Yeah, and there's been some discussion about the possibility of taking the two properties and actually joining them together into a single piece of property.
Merging them.
Merging them, yeah.
Yeah, and then there would be, and as part of the purchase from the state is to make sure that there's a restrictive conservation easement on the property limiting what can go on it. And we had originally talked about a kiosk, or like a Welcome to Tilton one, on the state-owned property. However, you're also planning on some kind of a kiosk, I believe, on this piece, and I'm not sure we need two, so we'll have to see how that works out.
So the Winnipesaukee is planning on a kiosk of some sort?
Well, excuse me.
Yeah, in the original conceptualization, since there would be a parking lot, there would be access to the trail.
Right.
It's nice when you have the parking lot, have something there that says Winnipesaukee River Trail, shows the trail on a map, and you were here.
Okay.
Gives people an idea. What we've been looking at is actually trying to work, and we need to find some additional volunteers to help us with this, but to develop a map that has little ad spaces for businesses around the side, where they can say, you know, the Tilton House of Pizza or something.
Right,
It's here,
right.
and this one's here, and have them numbered, and show them right where they are on a little side map. It's on the bigger map where they are downtown.
Right.
That's a great idea.
I
Yeah,
bet
it was
then
up in St. Albans,
Paratori
Vermont.
would be excellent at that.
And this Boy River, there's a trail that goes all along it, and they've got all the little things for St. Albans and for Richland Center and all those little towns along there. They have all the little businesses, have these little business cards, things along the side.
So, a question for Rick. So then when will the Trails Association and the engineer working with you in the town of Northfield, when will you be ready to sit down with Concom and the Selectmen? And I don't know if, I mean, you guys are welcome to attend, but, I mean, we can send you the information as soon as we get it. I thought he had already sent you the designs. I'll check and see.
I just don't recall it's possible. I looked at it, and I had received one a while back too, so it might not have just stuck in.
Okay.
I think we probably should be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before, is that they need to get one more piece of approval from the state.
Yeah.
And then they have to do it with revised drawing, and we'll be ready.
And then wait till after that.
Well, we could probably set a date, but set it for 2 minutes from now.
I'm just concerned because you guys want to start after our comment period is closed. You want to start,
No, there's one, we can still do the soil removal, no matter, we don't have to wait for that, and that's really what the next task is.
Okay.
So it does buy us some time. I mean, from our marching orders that we need from today is just to make sure we understand, have our marching orders for getting rid of the soil once the comment period is over. Once it's done, the source area is removed, you sort of have time to figure out what makes the most
Okay,
sense. So
good.
there's no rush to do anything. Of course, you must love the work and get going on it, but it really, it's you know, I think there's got to be a lot more coordination, a lot more time before this final covering system gets installed.
Right.
Yeah, because all the way along, the demo is the first objective, the second objective is the hotspot removal, groundwater monitoring, and then the final,
okay.
remediation or whatever you're going to do with soil excavation beyond the hotspot. That's what I understood. So, yeah, it's a timed process, and it has to be done in conjunction with what's going to happen on the other parcels.
The thing that will slow down final construction of the bridge itself is that the initial estimates we got several years ago were considerably lower than the estimates we're getting now for the actual construction of the bridge.
So Rip, if I could ask one other question now, how does the ABCA relate to the QAP, the QAP?
Yep, and just to explain, it's a quality assurance project plan. What the EPA does is they review to make sure all your samples that you're collecting meet their stringent requirements, to make sure that we're making decisions that are defensible. And I think, and Kathy, maybe you can explain more, but I think it has to do with when cleanups are done, they review to make sure that you follow all the proper procedures, so that in case someone challenges it, there's a very strict kind of record of this is how they follow, this is appropriate, and follows this sort of the standard of care in our industry.
Right, and that's exactly right, and that's the best way to put it. And so it's on sort of a parallel track. I mean, we're working here, and the next step is is once you fill in the gaps for the community relations plan as far as the comment period,
Yeah.
that will be submitted back to us for review, and then we'll approve that. So then that's off the checklist. And then the next thing is, obviously Jennifer and I will do comments to you on the APCA, and then you can start your public comment period on that. But in the meantime, on a parallel track, the site-specific quality assurance plan has been submitted to our laboratory already. That's under review, and that's just, again, for protection of the federal money and for you guys, so that the data that is submitted is, first of all, the data that's collected, analyzed, and then ultimately used to make decisions on remediation is the best quality data. So it has to adhere to standards that we have in our laboratory. So basically, our quality assurance chemist will review it, and then the state also reviews it. And so between the two, we just make sure that your consultant is using the right methodologies, the right protocols for laboratory analysis, they're doing the right, there's standard protocols for both types of samples and types of analysis, and we're just making sure it's a protective measure for all of our grantees that we go through this process.
Okay.
So anyway, so you guys submitted the craft, you sent it off, Judd Newcomb
Yep.
sent it off to me.
Yep.
I forwarded it to our laboratory, I know Jennifer, you have it. So that's on a parallel track.
Okay.
And then the comments will come back from both the state and from the EPA quality assurance folks. They'll go to Crederi. Crederi will finalize the quality assurance project plan. There's a formal signature process where those guys, as the project managers, the state signs it, I sign it, Joyce will probably sign it as the project manager for the grantee, and then everyone, it's an approved official document for how any data analysis, data sampling and analysis is conducted. So that's on the process. So there's no rush on that. I mean, it's going forward, but we have time as well on that. So I don't anticipate any problems with that. I don't think No. We're early into the season yet. We're not in the heat of the field season. Things can get a little tough, to get things out, but we're not in the rush. We still have our time period.
And in terms of what's in our SSQAP, this is a simple one, because, we're going to be removing soil, and then we're going to be taking out the lift, and really, we're going to be consolidating some soil and have to take a sample of that for disposal purposes, so that the soil that's removed from that excavation area. And really, that's it. The groundwater samples ultimately are going to go through. Now, here's a question now, because if ultimately it's going to be used as in-kind services, maybe it needs to be in the SSQAP, the groundwater samples, because currently, I don't think that we did. I don't think that we did. I think we left them out because our anticipation was that they were going to be, that's very easy to add them back in
So
here.
you were anticipating that the town...
The DES program was going to pay for that. Yeah, but if it's going to be in kind, it's going to probably have to be in here for you.
Okay.
So that's a mental note for
I'll hurry
myself.
up and get that answer for you.
Yeah, because we'll include it in any revisions,
You
and
can
I'll,
just have it as an addendum.
right, I'll be communicating with
Yeah.
Jennifer anyway, and if
Yeah.
we can do that. But anyway, to get back to sort of what we have to propose, there's essentially 6 samples that we're proposing that we'll take and we'll analyze as a part of the soil removal. 6 soil samples for arsenic and lead, and then there's some soils that we need to analyze from around the lift area. And once that gets removed, and then there's the waste characterization sample, which gets analyzed for a variety of things to satisfy the disposal facility. And really, so far, until we add groundwater, that's really all we have in our SSQAP. So it's pretty simple. We're not doing, there's not a lot of complexity
It's
here.
not a complex site, and it's not complex. So, so it's in review on our end, and you guys will be looking at it, so we'll just see what happens. I mean, typically, there's a little back and forth between our QA office, the
Yep.
state, and the consultant, and then, it's tightened up a little bit, questions are clarified, and things might have been, but it's just finalized. I mean, it's never usually just goes through without any comments. It usually has, a few comments.
To show that they read it.
So that they read it and that they went through it.
They always read it and always
They
consider it, so that's just nice about this process.
Okay.
The only question that I had on the soil removal, is there any local permitting that needs to be done, approvals? We're just going to be excavating, I assume, when we do the final soil covering design, that will have to go through, I guess, normal town approvals.
I don't believe so. I mean, we have, if you're working in the roadway, I know you have to get a permit, trench permit, but I don't see
Check.
anything.
I didn't think that there was one that we saw anyway.
It's not like they're removing soil, which would have to stay in town or something like that, so.
There isn't.
And we're not removing over, what, is it 80,000 square feet that triggers an alteration of terrain? What is- Or 40,000, 50,000, whatever.
There's no way that's going to trigger it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're going to go outside, it's small, very small area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good, that was really the only question that I had.
I have a question. You guys took down the building, you didn't notice any contamination under the building, right?
No,
Just the
we
left.
didn't.
Okay, so that was my, a little concern on what's happening. So we can uncover some sort of,
Trying, right.
yeah.
Well, you're always worried about finding a floor drain or something that was there, and
Right, so that was, yeah, so just.
No dead bodies?
no, there were the state historic preservation people would be happy to know that there weren't any Indian remains.
No matter if it's
I
photos.
say it's all fill anyways.
It is, I know.
Yes.
Are going to require to do some test borings in a few places somewhere along the way on this job.
Yeah.
We still don't know why, because we pointed out to them that so much of it was filled,
Yeah.
or it was dug up for a sewer line or something else. But it still requires, yeah.
We didn't get any archaeologists in there looking for Indian arrowheads and things?
No, we already had the sign off from the state, the ship, all right? You guys?
Shippo? What's that?
Yeah, it's all.
Yeah. No, that was, they were actually great. They
No,
were
I know,
great.
we already have it in the file, we're good.
We had a great process with them. They were very easy to deal with here, so that was good.
That's all taken care of, so.
So, for budget, in-kind service tracking and all that, we were just going to discuss that with you and,
Yeah, or we can talk, I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
we're on track. I don't know, are there any other decisions that you need from the board?
I need to get together, Rick, with you and try to set up a time and date when we, let you know when we have meetings and when you think would be the best time to sit down with us and try to discuss potential plans for the state-owned land.
And Kathy,
I
I'm going to
need
be
2 seconds of
doing
your
my
time after the meeting.
next quarterly
Sure.
report. I don't know, did you ever get a chance to look at the first one? Am I doing it right?
And the next one will actually have numbers.
Yes, I have numbers, yes. I have numbers now.
Invoice, but yes, if
Yep.
you're following the right format, yep, it is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and then at some point, you'll have
I'm going to make a folder just for
Yep,
There
Ernies.
really isn't.
Yeah, just have an old,
I have one at home. I just-
Right.
This will go in.
I did change the name, it's still under the Turgeon Estate. So I did put in parentheses Ernies, so that, to tie it in with this. But right now, the only thing they have under there is all the site assessment work that had been completed through the state's brownfields program. And then I did enter some numbers of what we had spent. I think I put in 22,000.
Yeah, there's a little bit of,
Yep.
yeah. I didn't print the acres off, but yeah, and so the next quarter, we can
Have a good ride home now.
Yep,
yeah? Can't be crunching, did you ride together?
great.
He was another meeting.
Yes, and I'll make sure that you get some pictures of disc. I have the one, so I'll just copy that one disc that you gave me and
Sure.
send it.
You have no one to give you black
We
and
meet the
brown
third
tonight?
Wednesday of every month,
Oh,
so the 15th, and the next is April, May 20th.
she always gives Catherine the black.
Yeah,
We can
This
set up
is
a
a,
separate work session if you want at some point.
Yeah, this project just keeps moving along. Just keeps
4:15,
moving
and then,
along.
Of course, that's the date for that public meeting anyway.
Yeah, we already have 2 events that are scheduled on the Tilton portion of the trail. I don't know if you're up to speed on this, Rick, but there's a fundraising walk for Alzheimer's and another one for Huntington's disease. And it would just be so nice if they could just, continue on the trail, so that they don't have to cross over Route 3 and 11, but we'll get there. So more and more.
We did just decide this past weekend too, that we're going to do trail cleanup this year
Yes.
on National Trails Day, which is June 1st.
June 1st.
And we want to meet at the far end by Route 140. That's the start for the repair and cleanup. I was through there just the other day, and as happens with all the trails every winter, there's always a little something that needs to be fixed. So there is already a truckload of gravel that's been committed to us, pipes, and another truckload from Edmonds, donations. And we've got several people in town that have little Kubota-type tractors that are narrow enough to fit the between the fences, who have volunteered to come and help and move
Nice.
gravel around and
Yep.
smooth things out for us. And we've asked informally of Brian Lombard, and he's got a formal process we have to apply for now, to go on the railroad side and clean out the culvert.
Right.
Oh, I've never asked him for permission before.
They are chock full of branches and leaves.
I mean, Hurricane Sandy's coming. I'm going to call and say,
Well,
oh, do you
that- right, that-
mind if I go clean your
All of us
culvert?
just went and cleaned it that day, because we knew we
Right.
absolutely had to.
Yeah,
And then we went back again after.
right.
But this one's just a normal cleanup day, and the official rules that we're supposed to ask. Because
Right.
by this point, the trains will be running again in theory,
Right.
so after April 15th. But that was after the date in the fall when the train stops, so. But we will figure that out as well.
Yep.
And Sharon McMillan, she's fine, she's happy. The sewer,
Yeah, if they made us build that other bridge.
and they don't even
and then
use
they
it.
don't drive on it, they drive on the railroad tracks.
Remember that whole meeting we had? We had to satisfy her and
Yep.
give her our firstborn children, and they don't even use it.
Right.
Why didn't you offer the dogs? I would have given some.
Yep, we're all set. I guess we are all
Thank you.
done, that's good.
Yep, we're all done.
Well, thank you so much, we really appreciate this.
Good to come out again. Good to touch base with you.
All right.
Were you suggesting that
Kinda
we might
exciting.
meet on the 20th, or we should be ready before